could easily be deployed into a disaster zone like that with radiation, where this isn't going to be affected with radiation like a human would be.
That's actually the direction I was going. If the environments are too dangerous for a person,
right,
those people would really be interested.
Right, absolutely. In addition to that, one of the things that we want to be able to carry, this is much later than our first phase, is be able to have this be a mobile cell tower. So in disasters like Katrina, you can immediately deploy this while it's doing search and rescue. It's also taking in phone calls while people that are down there are trying to call out. And it will provide that communication back and forth.
2 words, fuel cell.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we have time for one more question.
One more question?
How disposable is it? If you want to send this into a fire, can you have 3 or 4 if one of them gets consumed?
Yeah, so we want to have multiple levels of them. This one right here is about $10,000, but it's primarily in the 2 lasers that you see on there. Take those lasers away, it's about $2,500 for the rest of the system, and we're working to bring that down. Most of that is in the tiny inertial measurement unit. It's actually the same inertial measurement unit you put on like a Black Hawk helicopter. But we're actually working with some people here. Their research is to bring that much cheaper, from about $2,000 to about $300. So at some point we do want to have them fully disposable. So if you do lose one, it's not a big deal.
Great, thank you guys.
All right, thank you very much.
If you can stick around, it sounds like there might be some.
Yeah, we'll be here afterwards.
Okay, great. Will there be a flight demo or?
Not today, unfortunately.
All right, Steve, you can borrow this. Okay, is Kyle Molka here? There's 2 reasons why I need to find Kyle Molka. I don't think he is, though. I know the company he's working for, AppKey, is just launched. No, okay, so the 2 reasons I need to find Kyle Molka is, 1, because he helped plan the A2NewTech after party. So after Steve's presentation, I think people are going to be hanging out a little bit, asking questions, that sort of thing. But then at 7:30, I believe, we have a reservation at Dominic's. So for those of you who want to continue enjoying the fine weather and try their world-famous sangria and constant buzz, afterwards, I think a lot of us are going to be headed over there for dinner and drinks. The second reason I would need to find Kyle Molka is because I believe that Steve has tied him with his presentation tonight for the most A2NewTech presentations. They have both, this is Steve's 4th presentation, and I think Kyle has also done 4 presentations. Let's see here, just want to run through, make sure I announce everything. Yeah, looks good. Okay.
I texted him, by the way. He said he lost count. So he's
okay. Well, we'll get the official count later. Okay, so please welcome Steve Schwartz from Alpha Django.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Steve Schwartz, and the company I'm presenting is Alpha Django, which is sort of a meta startup. This is going to be a very experimental presentation. By the way, this is an HTML5 presentation in the browser. I decided to give it a try and see what happens. So no guarantees that it actually displays properly. But anyway, my company is Alpha Django. We're sort of a meta startup. Alpha Django builds web-based startups. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that we are the CTO and development team for startups that need it. So let's say you're well entrenched in an industry, you have an awesome idea, you have the connections, you're a good salesperson, you know it can be successful, you just happen not to be a technical person, or you don't have a lot of technical contacts. So what do? Is it better to spend the next 12 months trying to find a technical co-founder, or what if in that 12 months you could have hired us to just build it for you and it's making money within those 12 months? I'm actually not saying that one is better than the other, just that it's kind of a gray area that we decided to explore. Alpha Django actually started out as a normal software consultancy, so you would hire us and we would build your software. You know, there's a million of those. It's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. I've done a few startups in the past, and through doing those startups, I built a pretty good network of developers and designers and business people, and I got a lot of experience in doing those startups and in doing the marketing and the market research and talking to customers and refining startups, doing things like lean startup methodology and agile and all that good stuff. And I found that these teams I had built and this experience I had amassed could actually be leveraged and used to help other people build their startups. I actually unintentionally at one point realized that all the clients I had over the past year and a half were all startups, and I didn't even mean to do that. So I said, hey, there's something to this, and I started to realize that there were certain things I was doing that was not like what a normal software consultancy does. For one thing, software consultancies focus on this sort of process. They have a discovery phase, they spec out the software, and then they build it according to spec. It actually doesn't really go too well for startups, because with startups, a lot of times that spec is going to change 100 times a day. And also, the other thing about startups is that they actually need a lot of help and support in this fourth step, the refinement stage. And this is typically where software consultancies go away. And yet it's where startups need the most help. So what Alpha Django does is it focuses on getting the startups to that last refinement stage, to that last stage as quickly as possible so that they can refine. We get their minimum viable product built and launched and in front of customers so that we can actually help them talk to customers and figure out what it is they actually want and what they'll pay for. So, what does it take in the current ecosystem to actually build a successful startup? Well, now, since the cost of development and building a startup has gone down, the standards have gone up. You now, to actually be able to have a successful startup, you pretty much need to go ahead and build a prototype, gain traction, then start generating revenue or raise funding, and then scale up. And so when you're not a technical person, it's basically impossible to do steps 1, 2, and 3. So that's basically where we come in, and we focus on helping the startup with those first 3 steps so that they can actually scale up. So this is a case in point. Nick Gordon had an idea for a mobile app that would connect car dealerships with customers off hours, but he had no one to build it. In January last year, he found us. By February, we had an MVP all fleshed out and figured out what we were going to build and launch. By May, we actually had it launched. By August, it was generating money, and we had actually already begun work on version 2. So by August, we launched version 2. And as of today, CarCode is actually launched and deployed at over 100 dealers nationwide. A lot of them are centered around Seattle and Portland because that's where Nick lives. And it's doing great. It's actually making lots of money and growing. And just over a year ago, it was just an idea. So that's just one story. We actually have other starts. So CarCode's one. CrowdJuice, actually, Ed is in the audience here with CrowdJuice, and we just launched CrowdJuice with our first conference today in Ypsilanti, the Michigan Growth Capital Symposium. Greatmeister Rental, Fans Helping Artists is Greatmeister Rental is actually one of my first startups. Fans Helping Artists is another local startup. Lead was my second startup. Car Friend, Scout Force, A2NewTech, which is a Y Combinator company, and we're looking to keep going. And then there are other slides, but they're not as important. We do a lot of open source development. And there's our team.
Yeah.
Questions?
Thank you, Steve.
How do you scale since so much of what you do is about one-on-one time with your clients?
That's a really good question, and it actually depends on what you mean by scale. If you mean scale my business, I can tell you that. If you mean scale the startups, there's an entirely different answer to that.
Scale good.
So for scaling my business, it's very difficult to scale. And I'm actually not looking to scale it too much. Ideally, right now we have 3 people, including myself. Ideally, I wouldn't want to have more than maybe 5 or 6 people, because my goal is to basically build a really kick-ass development team that are the best at what we do, and then be able to provide a lot of one-on-one time. So I think instead of scaling, what we'll do is as demand gets greater and greater, we'll just have to get more and more selective with who the startups are that we partner with. And I can go ahead and answer, actually, let's pretend you also meant scaling the startups we work with. And the answer to that is that we actually don't. We're really good at the really early stage stuff, fleshing out the MVP, getting it built, launched, maybe doing a version 2 or version 3, building the revenue. When they get to the point where they're ready for hockey stick kind of growth, we would actually use our connections to build them a dedicated full-time team, and we actually also have a lot of connections with venture capitalists and angel investors, and I could connect them with them as well to get funding if they needed it. Yes?
So do you typically take an equity partnership in more startups?
Sometimes. It really depends. If we took equity, usually what we do is we start out on a contract basis, and then with some of the startups, if we work really well with them and we really like them, and we're right in there with the vision and helping them build the startup, then we do at that point sometimes offer an equity stake for drastically reduced rates. And so we do that for some startups. I would love to be able to do it for all the startups we work with. I would even love to be able to work on the startups only for equity. But, you know, I don't really have money, so we're not doing that yet.
Yes, another question?
Who do you see as your competition?
It's a good question. I don't really think about it. I'm sure there's like, probably Pivotal would be a Pivotal Labs who built Pivotal Tracker and did a lot of pioneering work with the like Agile methodology and Scrum and all of that would probably be an example. There's a few others. One of the issues is you could see almost any software consultancy as a competitor, but one of the things that we do differently is that with normal software consultancies, what we're doing is almost exactly opposed to what a software consultancy does, and that a software consultancy is trying to get billable hours. They're trying to maximize their profits by getting as many billable hours as they can. Whereas with me, since I'm acting as a lot of these startups CTO, it's actually my job to connect their vision with the development and help them figure out ways to avoid giving me money. So I actually spend half my day talking to clients and showing them how they can avoid giving me money. They'll be like, hey, we got 10 grand and we want to build this feature. And I'll look at it and I'll go, no, you know, that's a waste of money. Let's build this thing instead. It'll cost like $1,500. We'll have it done in like 4 days and you can see if anyone actually wants this. And so that's what I spend half my day doing.
And that's sort of where the equity versus money split comes, because you're helping them save money and then you're sort of aligning your interests to be successful as opposed to be billable.
Exactly. We're way more interested in the long-term success of all the startups we work with rather than our, you know, own short-term success and like increasing billable hours, which, you know, could be a problem because the more billable hours we have from this startup, it could actually negatively impact their ability to grow and succeed. So
I'm really fascinated by this like transition point where you helped a company get a V1, V2 of their product out, and then they're sort of they're going and doing the VC roadshow, they're going to raise a round. Have you had that transition yet where you sort of cut ties with someone and sort of just let them loose with their own development team? And
that's a good question. We're actually not yet. We're really close with a couple. So like Carfolds, for instance, it's I'd actually tell you how much, except it's being videoed, but it's making lots of money right now, and we're actually kind of on the verge of like, we're still doing really well with it, but it's entirely foreseeable that within the next year we might have to do that transition. We haven't yet. We've actually also come on board with a couple startups after they were already funded. So like one of the companies we're partnered partnered with and taking equity in is a Y Combinator startup. They finished Y Combinator last year, and so they have like institutional investors like Y Combinator and the startup fund and a bunch of other angel investors. And they actually brought us on board after the fact because they had a technical co-founder who, after they had to pivot a couple times, a technical co-founder, there was very little that was technically interesting about the project after they had to pivot to follow the money, basically. And that founder got a really good job somewhere making like 300 grand a year, so they left. And so then they went to a software consultancy and then figured out basically what I explained, that the goals don't really align and that doesn't usually work out well. And then they came to us and have been really happy. So we're actually coming on board with them after the initial stage, but still before that, and after the institutional investment, but before they need to scale up and have a full-time team. So that's another interesting one where I'm not really sure how long we'll need to be on board. Ideally, it won't be long, because the longer we're on board, that means the longer it's been that they didn't, you know, have that hockey stick growth and need a dedicated team. So
I think we have time for one more question. I think we're starting the timer.
Can you give us an idea of the range of cost for the projects that you do?
Yeah, actually, I can tell you, this is something that's really interesting because I have spec'd out a lot of startups. I've helped a lot of people. Basically, I have a lot of people who come to me with, you know, $180,000 pieces of software they want built. Of course, they don't know that's how much it costs to build something like what they have, but, you know, they'll come to me with 50-page specs or 100-page specs, and I'm like, yeah, that's what it's going to cost to build that if you were to just pay me. But I don't like building things that big, especially when you're a startup, because if you have something spec'd out that's that big of a project, you're doing it wrong. You need to get something small and launched and out there and making money, and you need to be getting user feedback. So one of the interesting things about that, and this is like totally coincidence, I never would have expected this, but out of all the startups I've helped figure out the MVP and help them spec out and figure out no matter what the startup was doing or what kind of technologies they're interfacing with or whatever, almost every single one of them has been somewhere in the range of like 20 to 40K for an MVP. Some of them have been smaller and more in the range of like 15K. Usually less than that, it's not really neat. It's usually nothing more than a CMS if it's less than that, so it's probably not a great MVP startup idea, unless you already have people paying you for that, in which point that would be awesome. And usually if it's more than that, it's too specced out and too much to build for an MVP. So it almost always comes to like the 20 to 40K range, and usually it's closer to the 20 to 25 the majority of the time.
There you go. That's how much you need to start a company. Thank you so much, Steve. Before we break, I just wanted to check one last time if there's any community announcements. Otherwise, we'll see you guys soon at Dominic's. Yes?
Sorry, I joined late, but my name is Mike, and I wanted to announce to the group that there's a new program called Develop Detroit that's just coming out. It's actually, we're going to be hosting our first class in June, but the idea is it's a 12-week program that you sign up for, similar to Code Academy in Chicago, but only we're focused on iOS apps. It'll be taught by some folks here in Ann Arbor, like Dave Koziel and Chris Adamson and Tom Crawford. But we'll be hosting it downtown. It's in partnership with the Dan Gilbert World, Detroit Venture Partners, and Resonant Ventures is involved too. So anyone who's interested and would like to learn how to program an iPhone app or an iPad app, check out devdet.com, and hopefully by the end of the summer you can build a prototype.
Awesome.
Yeah, devdet.com.
Okay, cool. Thanks, you guys.
Hey, nice talk. Yeah, thank you very much. It's interesting.